Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode number 9, Social Selling for Newbies. Gentlemen, welcome. We have everybody. We have the whole band together today. Plus, we have our guest today, Red Stafstrom, right? Stafstrom, Red Stafstrom.
It's Stafstrom, but it's a piece of IKEA furniture, basically, is what I'm asking you to pronounce. So I expect nobody to get it right.
Is it hard to put together?
So don't worry about that.
Okay, yeah. So, and Brandon, it must be 5 o'clock in Atlanta. That's the only thing I can think of because I was noticing you're, getting an early start here. So,
I'm in our ProLink office here, and it's the day before Thanksgiving. And when our CEO says we should have a little bit of like meat and cheese and wine and bourbon and celebrate, and I was like, well, as long as we do it before Social Selling for Newbies, I'm in.
So you're going to have a lot of extra knowledge to share today, I assume.
Either that or I'm going to fall asleep. One of the two will tell.
Right.
Yes.
Carson, you have your bar going, but you're not quite opening the bar quite yet, right? So
I haven't started yet. So I'm going to give everybody a little sneak peek. So I'm a big fan of the 1980s movie Cocktail. So I have a couple of bartenders that oversee my bar cart here. So just a little throwback for you there, but haven't started yet. I got to do the cleaning to help the wife before I get started on any holiday festivities. But I'm here with you in spirit.
No pun intended, right? So Brandon, were you an extra in Cocktail by any chance? We need to make sure we extract all of these things before.
I was not. I wish I was. Okay. I would have made a really, really good, inebriated background person in Cocktail.
I think he snuck up behind Brian Brown with a mop in one pivotal scene with Tom Cruise.
I could have done that.
I think so, but
yeah.
So you have to ask these things because he doesn't always tell us all of these things. We have to kind of yank it out of him. So
his IMDb page is not fully built out yet. So.
That's right. That's
right.
right.
Gosh.
All right. See, Red, what you got yourself into here.
I love it. Like if I was, I just did the Irish goodbye throughout all of my drinking years. So I wouldn't have been a good extra anyway.
So Red, what they're referring to is I was an extra in Back to the Future. And I was in the cafeteria scene in 1955. And now that I've admitted that, it just comes up a lot, which is fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
And I was one of Mike Seaver's buddies in Growing Pains. So we just have those conversations. Yes.
And we know that if we keep peeling the onion, more is going to come out. So that's all we're trying to accomplish here. But
so I think we should talk about social selling for newbies because Red's got a lot of great information to share, and plus that way it gets the focus off of me.
We could put it right back on. I mean, this is your show. We can keep talking about your ill-fated career in Hollywood that never quite made it to porn, but.
All right, we're done with movie talk now. We're going in. Hey, we got Kenny and Valerie and Axel and people joining from all over. For those on the podcast, we record live on LinkedIn, and luckily we get a bunch of people that come in and they comment and they ask questions. So thanks everybody that's jumping on and giving us their comments. And please feel free to ask questions because we got Red here to answer them for you.
Yeah. And I'm now in control of things, and clearly I have no idea what I'm doing because I wanted to put the comments on here, but it's anyway, we'll move on. Red, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and anything else that we should know.
So I've been doing sales for about 20 years now. I graduated, actually, I was working in sales all through college. I knocked door to door. I did all the sales jobs that everybody hates, the telemarketing gigs. Went on to being like a stockbroker, selling cars. I was the grunt of the sales industry for a lot of years. Eventually, it led to full-fledged burnout for me. Like, there's a joke by a comedian named Tommy Johnigan. He says, I didn't cry like a baby. I cried like a grown man. Babies don't have the lung capacity to make the noises I did. And that was the kind of breakdown that I had. From there, I rebuilt everything that I knew about sales. Ground up, read everything that I could about sales, psychology, anthropology, sociology, learned human beings better than most people out there. That's really my expertise is human beings, emotions. Now what I do is I train organizations, I train salespeople to sell in a way that isn't all me, sell in an emotionally intelligent way, particularly helping introverts, because I think introverts can absolutely be some of the best salespeople out there, given they know what they're doing and given they create the process that works for them rather than becoming part of the KPI factory.
Interesting point about the introvert. Kind of unpack that a bit more. Why do you think that introverts, I mean, most people would think, sales is for an extrovert, not an introvert. Yeah. What do you see the qualities that make you say that?
Well, so let's start with what introverts generally like to talk about. What introverts hate is small talk. It's not that we don't like people or that we hate being around people. It's we hate the small talk because that's draining for us. The conversations that introverts like to have are very much the well conversations as opposed to the puddle conversations. So what I mean by that is if you're talking to an extrovert, they're perfectly happy making small talk. What's the weather by you? Did you catch the game last night? All of those kinds of things. An introvert loves those deep rabbit hole conversations, really diving into the minutia of what a person is thinking, feeling, the exchange of ideas, and not just the exchange of pleasantries. So it's about having a smaller circle that's much deeper as opposed to a wide circle that's very shallow.
Interesting. And
in the B2B world, this is the absolute best way to do it because there is not an infinite amount of potential prospects out there. Your ICP doesn't fit 300 billion people. It fits maybe 1,000. So to be looking at it as you need to be making 100 phone calls a day doesn't work. Instead, you need those deeper relationships with a smaller pool of customers.
Interesting. So what I hear you saying is, as an introvert, there will generally go into more higher quality conversations sooner and possibly go deeper rather than trying to have maybe a lesser, as you said, kind of a small talk conversation and really focus on, the meat on the bone, so to speak, of what's going on.
Like if I'm an introvert and I know that my battery is going to be drained with small talk conversations, my relationship building is let me get right to the point. Which if you're talking to a CEO or somebody right like at that decision maker level, they don't want to talk about the picture behind them that has a bow. They want to talk about, let's get to business. This is the problem I solve. These are the implications that it could turn into. And this is how I provide that solution.
Interesting. So Carson, Brandon, jump in. What's your take?
Yeah, this is fascinating stuff. I'm thinking about a few different ways that we could go about this. First off, because the title of this particular show is Overcoming Social Insecurities and Growing Your Social Cred. We talk a lot about branding. We talk about a lot about social selling. And what's interesting, believe it or not, I'm an introvert. And so what Red was talking about, it resonated with me a great deal because that was one of the things that I've been coached on is I've got to do more of like the more in-depth, like the small talk, starting off with small talk as opposed to just jumping into the meat on the bones and really getting to the key priorities. So, Red, I'd love to get your take on, everyone that I talk to about social selling, there's often that trepidation. There's that, well, I'm not really comfortable with leveraging these mediums. I don't want to put myself out there and I got to get it just right. It's got to be perfect. I don't know how to say what I want to say or if it's worth it. How can introverts leverage some of these social platforms to form meaningful relationships?
To me, it's you find the place where you're the most comfortable in it, in each one. Like you don't necessarily have to jump into them and jump right into video. If you like writing long form, start a blog and you promote that on other platforms. If you like photography, use photography. You like whatever, find what you enjoy the most. For me, what I really loved, I've kind of grown my LinkedIn profile from 0 to 8,000. I just crossed the 8,000 follower mark within a year. I basically started in February. The biggest thing that I did was commenting. Like, I'm not going to be able to write these giant long posts. Yes. Rather than create 3 posts a day, I'll comment on 15 to 25 different people. And that's given me so much more leverage because now I'm not only like creating my own content, I'm also leveraging the network that they've already built.
Yeah, it's so smart, Red. That's so smart.
But again, you have to start from the place as an introvert, understand that you have that social battery, that every interaction is going to drain you that little bit, and you need to make sure you use the most of it. Extroverts are lucky because every social interaction recharges them. So they have that almost infinite ability to talk. We don't. So we have to be much more strategic and really dive into what works before we burn out, rather than just kind of doubling down on what doesn't.
I feel like I should be paying you by the hour right now, Red, because you're like really.
You're more than welcome to.
This is.
You need to go. Person, you need to go lie down on the couch.
Yeah, we'll put his Venmo in the comments.
There you go. I want to sit in that for a second, because you know what I found, Red, over time is, you know, when you think about the mediums, I always tell people, like, find mediums you're comfortable with, which is exactly what you just said. And whereas maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I wouldn't have been comfortable doing things like podcasting or video content, I find that over time I become more able to embrace some of these types of things. I think about it kind of like a stock portfolio. I never want to discriminate against any way that I could conceivably create and nurture a relationship that I didn't have. And you utilize it to get the relationship, not to sell anything. Like, sales is a byproduct of having a great relationship. Focus on getting the meeting, focus on creating the relationship. And I love what you said too about the commenting piece. Talk more about that. If somebody's out there today and they're thinking about how could they intentionally comment in a way that's going to grow meaningful connections, what should they be doing?
So first and foremost, no comments under 4 or 5 words. Don't say, how are you doing? Great post, that 100 emojis. Stop that. You need to add to the conversation. You need to say something that's insightful. Even if you're challenging what they say, have those conversations. Most people are, if they're putting themselves out there, they're up to a certain level of challenge anyway. So don't be afraid to do that. Just, what are your first thoughts? The second thing is those comments very, very quickly turn into posts that you could do. If you ever don't have an idea for a post, just scroll through your feed. You'll find something you'll either really agree with or you really disagree with, and you'll put it in your own voice.
Powerful.
So we have an interesting question here from Michelle I wanted to jump in with, because I think it's very relevant to what you were talking about, is what if you're selling to the introvert, but you're the extrovert? You know, and I guess you could go the other way around too, right? So what if you're the introvert and or the extrovert and you're selling to the, you know what I mean?
Well, the idea is your job is to sell how they are comfortable. I like that we moved from sales enablement to buyer enablement, but it's not quite there yet. No. Like, it's still got its flaws. But the idea is you sell the way your buyer is comfortable. Your job is to facilitate comfort and trust from your buyer, and you can't do that by dragging them along like a stubborn dog. So I'm an introvert, I'm talking to an extrovert, I have to put up with a little bit of small talk, but that also means afterwards I may need to give myself 5 minutes to recharge. So understand, your job is to make the buyer comfortable, not to fake who you are. Like, they can see that you're going to drain out, and extroverts are very good at picking up on that too. But have the conversation they want to have, and then step back and recharge and get ready for the next one as you need to.
So here's another question, Red. Thinking about, you know, you're a veteran of sales. You're an experienced salesperson. You've had quite the journey. I know a little bit, obviously, about your background just from our prior chats. But what I'd love to hone in on is focusing on some of the social selling components. Yes. How and when did you decide to assimilate some of these things into your arsenal? And how would you say it's evolved over time? Because I would say all of us, you know, a commonality is I started dabbling with some of this stuff a decade ago, but it looked nothing like what it looks like now. How did your journey kind of begin? Why did you assimilate some of this stuff? And how has it evolved?
So I am a late adopter. I did not like social media for a long time, and in a lot of ways I still don't. I don't care that my aunt had a bologna sandwich for the first time in 8 years. I just don't care. But the very first
dance, by the way, my aunt made a TikTok dance of her first bologna sandwich. What about you?
Did it go viral? Did it go viral?
Brandon made a cameo, by the way.
Well, for me, it was understanding that my job as a salesperson is not to go where I'm comfortable, but go where my buyers are comfortable. That was the very first hurdle to jump over.
Yes.
And if I look at like the average use on FaceTime for a typical Facebook user is a half hour a day. Now let's go back 100 years to the point before phones, before anything. Imagine there is a bar in your neighborhood that all of your ideal clients are going to a half hour a night. Would you ever leave before psoriasis sets in? And of course you wouldn't. You'd be there handing out business cards, having conversations, building those relationships because that's your career. And in fact, that half hour at the bar could be way more effective than 8 hours of cold calling or writing letters. So the reason I love social selling is it's because it's where the people are. And I've kind of had to learn what to step into in order to do that.
You know, we could have had Red on our episode of Nothing Has Changed. It's just different. I mean, that's exactly what he just said there is you go where your customers are. And if they're on Facebook, you go there. They're on LinkedIn, you go there. Or Carson and I were dipping our toe and trying to figure out TikTok because we know a lot of people are there that we want to talk to. And it's not about selling. It's about talking and meeting and building rapport.
It's all about creating deep conversations and conversations about problems that you have an opportunity to solve. That's really it. Wherever those conversations happen, over the phone, over email, over SMS, or over social, and social gives you such a scalability level that no other tool really does. I could make 50 phone calls to past customers, or I could do one post, and 50 people will engage on it. Well, more than that, but the idea is pretty much the same. And the post takes me 15 minutes. The phone calls will take me a full day.
Probability.
So it's all of it. Yeah, it's so much better. Email marketing is still great. I still love email marketing. I'm not going to sit here and say email is dead. But, I mean, there are people bragging about a 4% open rate. Yeah. So it's just not my favorite. Plus, you benefit in social media because the dopamine is going. People are going through their feed and they're seeing things that they like. Their feed has been tailored, so you're getting them in a good mood. I don't know many people who have looked through their emails and have a brilliant smile on their face.
Right. And you know, you touch on something there that I like to tell people is around the dopamine. I mean, we can make you said two things I love, Red. You talked about commenting, which is my spiel, right? That's my shtick. Like if I had a hammer, it's comment. We'll figure out how to post later. Just start commenting. Take your top 100 prospects and go to their profiles once a week, twice a week, look at their post activity and comment on anything that they've engaged with. They've liked, they commented, they posted. Start there. Everything else gets easier from there.
And don't worry about DMing yet. Like that's a big one. Commenting is such a great jump off to a DM. And you can ask about that rather than just jumping in and pitch slapping them.
Yep. Comment
and offering your solution before you even know if they have the problem.
Yeah, for sure.
Likewise, my favorite thing for comments now is giving out referrals. So I see a post of somebody who is having a problem. I know somebody who solves that problem, and I tag them in it. Now I've helped facilitate a relationship, and I could go back a week later. Hey, how did you get along with Marcus? And now I'm much closer to that trusted advisor role. I just saw the DM, direct message. So anything like a private message, direct message. But now I can go back and say, hey, I tagged Marcus in your post last week. I think he could help you with blank. Were you guys able to connect, or do you want me to make a more formal introduction? Now I'm deepening two relationships.
So Red, you said that you kind of started your LinkedIn career with commenting predominantly, and you kind of went from 0 to 8,000. Have you, did you focus in on what you believed was your ideal customer profile? And are those 8,000, do you feel like you've built a community of more of the people you want to be talking to, or how has that emerged from the commenting process?
So yes and no. I look at it in two different ways. I look at it as growth and niche. The way LinkedIn works is the only people who can see my content that I put out there are either followers or first, second, third degree connections. So I'm willing to connect and have followers who may not be my ideal customer, because I know if the average LinkedIn user has 1.3, 1,300 connections, that one connection of mine can now broaden my reach by 1,300 people. So I'm looking at that as a growth. But then I also have this niche aspect where I use my content to niche down even further. So it's a hybrid technique. The way I've been looking at it is very much like a bug zapper. I turn on the bright light, I bring in everybody, and then I'll zap the people I don't want to work with.
Red,
so this is very top of funnel.
This is great.
Yeah.
I love the analogies. It's amazing. I guess too, you know, growing your social cred, like I would be very curious too, like, okay, so you start out, you're commenting, you're getting some engagement. People are likely having a reaction to your comments. People may be, or your target audience may be responding. I loved the tagging someone, because at the end of the day, all we're trying to do is seek to become a trusted advisor of this audience. And
don't be antisocial on a social network.
Exactly. By connecting the dots and putting them in touch with somebody who can solve their problem, especially when and even when it isn't you. Amazing technique. I've got a lot of deals that I could point back to where it wasn't about like me trying to be the hero. It was, hey, you need to talk to this person. So I love that philosophy. I think it's amazing how many things you can take from sales fundamentals that we've been putting in place for 20 plus years, whether it was by phone, by door knock, whatever it is, and you can do it all on social media.
So like we've talked about relationship selling, but I've been kind of fighting against relationships too much, and it's much more about trust as opposed to relationship.
Sure.
And the reason I want to fight against that is how many people have a cousin who has their real estate license, but we didn't buy or sell their house through them? Almost all of us. You know, and the reason isn't because we don't like them. It's not that we don't have a good relationship with them. It's because we don't trust their competency. I love my wife. She's not going to do heart surgery on me. So understands that when you're trying to build trust, the equation that I tell people is trust is equal to character plus competency. You need to like the person and you need to believe they're able to do the job. So by showing your competency, showing that you know what you're doing on social media, and showing your character a little bit. There's a reason I post memes. There's a reason I use all of these. You know, I get more comments on my beard than almost any of my real life accomplishments. Like, it's half the time you see me, I don't have this backdrop. I'm sitting in a chair and I have the Legend of Zelda shield behind me. Like, I show my character in a lot of ways to get people to like me. And I show that I'm competent, that I know what I'm talking about. And that's how I build trust. So that's the social media strategy in and of itself, is character competency.
Yeah, I love the character and competency. One of the things in my book, I talk about know, like, trust as a key thing. But I think taking trust and taking that definition to another level, which is, well, what the hell does that really mean, right? It's character plus confidence. And I think that's something that you can actually then start working towards.
Because I love the know, like, trust, but the like has kind of flown out the window recently because so many people are commoditized now. Like, I don't like Amazon. I still order from them. I absolutely hate Comcast. I still get cable and internet through them. There are a lot of people who are able to be market dominators because of their competence and not their character. So that's kind of the difference, is when you look at that path diverging in the woods, okay, do I want to work with somebody I like, or do I want to work with somebody who's competent? The market goes towards competent every time. So don't worry about everybody loving you and treating you like a beloved figure. Show that you're great at what you do.
Yeah, and I think there's a bit of a difference there, saying that you don't like Comcast, but still, get internet access from them. You don't have to like Comcast to say it's the best option. But when it comes to B2B or it comes to professional service, there is an element, I think, of like that's important. But I really do like the way that you define trust. And I agree with you. There's a bit of, I have to like you, but then I have to believe that you're competent. And that's where trust comes in. And that's one of the things that is so important about social media is that you can demonstrate being likable, as you talked about memes. I use dad jokes. I use social selling sucks. I use humor. But then the trust and the competency also comes in with what we post. And in social selling, you can do that faster. You can almost kind of do it at the same time, and you can do it with more people than you do old school, shaking one hand at a time.
Yeah.
I'm loving, by the way, for everybody listening, we've got our private chat that's like, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this is really good. And I will say, Red, that we've got the most chat going on internally between us, with all of us like raising our hand. You've brought a lot of value, a lot of great topics to the show today.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I'm here for.
And I want to spotlight what Thomas was saying here is, and I think this kind of nails, but I also think he's bringing up a really good point about risk, right? So understanding the user experience, what they do, how you provide value. Not only are you building that confidence and that know, like, trust, but that inherently makes you feel like if you're the customer, you have reduced risk, right? Because then even if something does go wrong, which sometimes it does in B2B, at least you can trust and you have a good relationship with the company to work it out, versus something that is, there's a lot of variables, I guess, that are factoring into this to make a buying decision.
Well, and for me, like, the big part of that is, if you want to build trust, tell people exactly what will go wrong. Tell them and be very upfront, be very honest. Okay, if you sign up with me, it's going to take blank amount of time to see an ROI. And if you tell them that upfront before they sign a contract, before they send you a check, which is a little antiquated this day and age, before they send you a Venmo, that is so much. Like, let them know the risk. Don't hide those. And that's why so many salespeople struggle, is they try to hide the risks this whole time and they can't know. And then all of a sudden everything blows up because something was unexpected. People aren't upset when something bad happens. People are upset when they are surprised by something bad happening.
Yes.
Well said. Well said. Yes. Red, this is awesome. And I'm a big fan of the practical application. Our audience, our listeners are mostly folks that are researching social selling. They may be dabbling in it today. They may be relatively proficient. And we call this social selling for newbies, because it's all about, okay, what are the next steps? What should I be doing? What should I be thinking about? So if you were to tell our audience, our listeners today, how they should be getting started, especially if they're having some relative insecurities around what they post, how often they post, like, my gosh, I'm reading, I need to be making a post every single day, or I'm reading that I need to do video and this and that. How should they be thinking about it? How can you peel it back and give them some practical application that they could think about today to do this well?
So I'm going to give 2 real points. The first is, be very, very clear on your ICP, your ideal customer profile. Know who they are. They should be your invisible best friends, like when you were 3 years old. You should be able to talk to them, have those conversations, understand who they are. I have stock photos of my ICP. Amazing. I have gone that far. I have given them names. I have given them.
Are they up on your wall?
I know, but I have them on my background of my computer. Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
Like I have 2. I have Ryan and Sarah, and I know, okay, what kind of school did they go to? What's their background? What hobbies do they have? Where do they like to go out to dinner? And the more I understand that ideal customer profile, the more I can write, the more I can comment, the more I can target who I want to talk to and the kind of conversation that I have. Everybody has relationships that are drastically different. I talk to my grandmother different than I talk to my wife. So how do you talk to that person that you've created? So that's the first. And the second is, don't worry about being everywhere. Don't worry about being on Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. You can't be everywhere. You can't do all of them. Figure out the ones that are most important for your ideal customer. Where do they want to hang out? My ICP hangs out on LinkedIn, so I spend most of my time on LinkedIn. I also add things to YouTube, but I don't put as much work into that because that's not my priority. It's basically just a server repository of old information that I use.
You know, what's interesting about, I think, to kind of pull together a lot of the conversation we've had today, and would like all of, Red and everybody's take on this, but what I'm hearing is, before you kind of launch in, right, to the social world, first of all, kind of do an evaluation of yourself, your customer. So, look at yourself and say, hey, am I inherently more of an introvert or an extrovert? Okay, there's no wrong answer, right? I am what I am, right? What do I enjoy talking about? What are my ideal customer? What do they enjoy talk about? And really almost put together your social plan, right? And I think this can align. This has very little to do with KPIs or hitting your quota. This it's like your relationship plan. And how am I going to go out and build that relationship so that in 12 months, I have 8,000 or more or less 8,000 people that I would invite to Thanksgiving dinner, right? It's like that sort of mindset.
Yeah, no, I definitely would not invite that many people. I do not want to see that many people ever in even concerts. That's too many people. But what I also would like to bring up is, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the JK5 method, the Jenner Kirshner 5 method before. It's one of my favorite tools. I have 5 topics that I talk about regularly. And if I'm ever struggling for something to talk about, I just cycle those 5. So for me, it's introversion, sales, marketing, emotional intelligence, and humor. And I cycle those 5. And once I do that, it helps create a coherent voice because I'm talking about these things regularly. If you're only talking about one thing over and over and over and over again, people will tune out. I know people on there, they have a diet plan, and it's a great diet plan, but it's what they talk about every single post, and I've muted them. I like them, but I'm just sick of hearing about, I need to spend some quality time with the Nordic Track and stop knocking back steak all the time. Like, no one is going to tear me away from mashed potatoes this weekend. It's never going to happen.
For sure.
But, if you only talk about your product, if you only talk about one thing over and over, people will tune out. You'll lose engagement. It will go nowhere.
Well, and that's not real anyway, right? I mean, that's not, in real life, you definitely talk about more than one thing. So I think having that focus, but I think, again, having that plan, knowing where you're comfortable, know where you're going, I think it makes the whole social thing way less intimidating, right? Yes. It removes the insecurity, and then you can start to build on top of it. And as I'm hearing today, I think there's a lot, that we can continue to talk about even in the community, and that we have the Social Selling HQ community and so forth to really help people just get more comfortable with the whole process that's there.
Yeah. The way I've been looking at it all, when you're talking about finding where you're comfortable and everything, I'm going to go right back to Cocktail with Carson. I look at each platform like I would a bar. So LinkedIn is like a professional networking event. I see Facebook like a dive bar. I see Instagram like that trendy first date spot. Find the bar you enjoy hanging out in.
Wait, what's
and then
Twitter?
Build it from there.
What's Twitter?
Twitter? Oh, I think that's drinking out of a garbage, one of those paper bags behind a dumpster right now. I am not a fan of Twitter.
Again, is TikTok like a disco or a dance bar?
Yeah. What was that?
Is TikTok like a dance club or?
Way too many young people, bright colors, dancing, and I dance like an 8-year-old with a sparkler, so I am never going to look good on there.
TikTok would be like a junior high dance at school or something, wouldn't it?
Well, but let me also say this. TikTok has one of the best free video editing tools there is out there. So even if you aren't using TikTok to grow a following on it, it is a great tool to create content, shoot it, add the captions and everything, and then post it on LinkedIn.
Except for the TikTok watermark,
which no one even pays attention to anyway. Yeah. But it's still a free video editor.
Right. So, Red, I have a question for you because I told James, I think James Gilman, he might be on live with us yesterday. So he's a CEO of a company. His door knocked, cold called, done all of that as a salesman. He's now a CEO. We had a get together yesterday at a local cigar bar. James shows up, larger in life. He's got a box of cookies. He shakes hands with everybody. He talks to everybody. Mm-hmm. Like the life of the group.
Yeah.
And then towards the end of the day, or the end of our time together before he leaves, he goes, "Hey, so your topic on the show tomorrow?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Social insecurities." He's like, "That's me." He's like, I never know what to say or how to say it, or is it a good thing to say? And so I end up just not doing anything.
Yep.
And I thought, man, I'm like, I got to ask Red that question, because that is what so many people, and I would imagine many people that are listening on the podcast or on LinkedIn for the live or Facebook for the live, they're like, yeah, that's me. So I wanted to ask you, I share that as the example. Like I said, I mean, he kind of worked the room, had a box of cookies, introduced himself to everybody, and then turns around, 40 minutes later and tells me, "Yeah, I'm scared to death to post anything. Like, what do I do?" How do you answer that?
So let's start, go right back to that introvert extrovert thing, because that is a very introvert thing to say when you're thinking the stereotypical Ali Sheedy and Breakfast Club introvert, like that social anxiety side of it. You know,
do I need to shake out my dandruff or something?
I think you should. I mean, this is getting a little gray for you, so it might be there.
I think we need to come up with a subplot on this show where Brandon is like the Johnny Drama of all these shows. So every time we come up with a movie, it's like, well, I think Brandon had a cameo appearance when they were walking to detention hall in 1 minute, one hour in, or something along those lines. But please, I digress.
He actually coordinated the dance on the banister, actually.
Better. Love that.
That's it. Yes. But again, we're looking at introverts. Introverts have that social battery that we can look at. Now, you can use that social battery to put on an Iron Man suit and pretend you're somebody you're not and use it that way. But he's probably completely burnt out and depleted at the end of it, which my guess is probably true. Understands, just because you are an introvert, just because you have social anxiety, doesn't mean you don't have social skills. It's just you question it a lot more. You're very inter-focused, which is the definition of introvert from Carl Jung. So how are you using that battery? What are you doing it with? Like, I have a certain amount of energy. I could use it playing basketball the same way, but that doesn't mean I'm not completely drained at the end. So if you're having that anxiety, if you still feel like something's wrong, if it's keeping you from trying social media, okay, that's fine. Start small and recharge afterwards, and then analyze what worked, what didn't. 5 comments a day.
One of the things that I tell people too, when it comes to either a comment or a post, is to write like you talk. I think that's one of the best and easiest ways. So many people get in front of their computer and they go, and it's because they're trying to craft a message versus just say something. And that's one of the ones for anybody. I think that's the easiest one to get started, is just write like you talk. Don't overthink it. And I like what Red said, go make 5 comments a day. Start there.
My strategy when I started was 1 post a day, 25 comments. Easy enough to do. It's not astronomical, but those comments bring people back to the post, which brings new connection. And it's that Jim Collins flywheel analogy at that point.
I call it the social 2-step.
Yeah. Well, again, I dance like an 8-year-old with a sparkler, so I am not doing any kind of 2-step.
I dance like Phoebe from Friends jogs through Central Park. You guys ever see that one?
Oh, that's a reference.
Yeah,
that is a reference.
I remember seeing you with that. You were an extra in Central Park when she was jogging through that. Yeah.
Bravo.
Yeah, he was changing the fountain on the theme song.
Yeah. So, Carson, take us home. Do you have any final questions for Red? I mean, I think we've covered a lot of serious knowledge bombs today, and we might have to continue this another time, but any final questions?
No, look, Red said something that really stuck with me, and it's around, especially this whole theme of social insecurity. Just because you have a social insecurity doesn't mean you lack any social skills. You may let you lack for nothing, when it comes to that element. And so I loved the practical application piece of how we can, proactively go out there today and create a mechanism that, can work for you for whatever you're looking to do. It's about being focused and targeted on who your target audience is and going out and creating those relationships. Red, I'd love to hear from you. What would you say is probably your most tangible outcome or, win or success that you would tout as a result of social? What are you most proud of from your social selling approach?
I work for myself now. That's like for me, it's, again, I've gone through the ringer. I've gone through all of this stuff back in the day, like, the toxic bosses, being in those KPI factors. You need to make X number of calls a day, knock on X number of doors. Now I get to decide how I want to sell. I don't have to listen to somebody tell me. There was one point I worked in the trucking industry, and I would go and talk to trucking companies, and my boss wanted me to wear khakis and a blue blazer with the brass buttons, like I'm meeting Miffy at the yacht club. And I had to do it because it's what my boss told me. Now I can sit here in an $8 t-shirt, covered in tattoos, looking borderline homeless, and people love it.
Yes. Brilliant.
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
All right. Well, some really good stuff today. Thank you, Red. Really, really some great insights. And I think this is one we should listen to a couple of times and make some notes.
Red, thank you. Thank you for making me look good, because I was the one that invited you to our show. And now I'm feeling pretty good going into Thanksgiving weekend. Like I did something good this week.
Yeah, and that's, again, like when you're looking at social too, that's another great thing to do, is if you make other people look good, that just shows the character side of trust. So the more you can make other people look good, tag other people who had brilliant comments. That's another strategy alone.
Well said.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, have a great Thanksgiving, everybody. Thank you, everybody who has commented.
Except for the people that put the comments in there about a private dating chat. That's like social selling crap.
Yeah, that's a no-no.
Get rid of that garbage on there.
I think that's a bot. We got picked up.
Yeah.
I think that got picked up when Red mentioned something about you being in the porn industry or something.
Yeah, well,
I was never an extra in that industry.
Okay. We've heard it here.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go home and explain things. I got to go home and explain things to my mom, my wife, my daughters. Like, come on, guys.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Right.
We have an interesting conversation this year.
That's right. It's going to be a fun conversation around pumpkin pie now.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a good Thanksgiving, and we'll see everybody next week.
Until next time, happy social selling.
That's right. Thanks, Red. You were awesome.
Anytime, guys.